Her family rejected her for being ugly until the cowboys said, "She is my woman now." Lila grew up in a small, quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. It was the kind of place where first impressions lasted forever, and appearances mattered more than anything else. From the moment she was a little girl, Lila noticed how her family treated her differently. Her older sister, Clara, was always praised for her looks, her charm, and the way she could make people laugh. Lila, on the other hand, was rarely noticed. Her parents often compared her to Clara, saying things like, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Or, "If only you dressed differently, maybe people would see your good qualities." At first, Lila tried to understand their words as guidance, hoping that if she changed a little, they might accept her. She brushed her hair carefully every morning, washed her face repeatedly, and tried to wear the prettiest clothes she could find at the local store. She practiced smiling in the mirror until it looked natural, hoping that one day someone would notice her for who she was. But no matter what she did, it never seemed enough. Her family's eyes never looked at her the way they looked at her sister or other girls in town. School was another challenge. Lila attended the local high school, a modest building with creaky wooden floors and a playground that had seen better days. Her classmates often whispered behind her back. They called her names, laughed when she tripped over her shoelaces, and made comments about her clothes or the way she looked. Lila tried to ignore them, but the words cut deep. Every morning she would stare at her reflection in the bathroom mirror and wonder if there was something fundamentally wrong with her. She wondered if she would ever be beautiful enough to be loved, accepted, or even just noticed. Despite all this, Lila had something that no one could take away from her: her resilience. She was smart, observant, and had a way of seeing the world differently. When life felt heavy, she would escape into her imagination. She loved painting, especially landscapes. She would walk to the fields near her home, where wildflowers grew freely and the wind whispered through the tall grass. Sitting there with a sketchbook on her lap, she could forget the cruel words, the staring eyes, and the cold comments from her family. The colors she painted were bright and full of life, exactly the opposite of how she often felt inside. Her paintings were her secret world. She painted sunsets that melted into the horizon, meadows dotted with colorful flowers, and animals she imagined roaming freely. No one in her family appreciated her talent. Her mother once glanced at a painting and said, "Why do you waste your time on this? You'll never make a living with art." Her father rarely spoke to her at all unless it was to criticize her. Lila learned to hide her artwork in a drawer, only bringing it out when she was alone. Yet, even hidden, her paintings gave her hope. They reminded her that beauty could exist in unexpected places, and maybe, just maybe, she could find a place where she belonged. Even though her family's rejection was constant, Lila found small pockets of happiness. She loved reading books, especially stories about people who overcame hardships. She admired characters who were brave, kind, and true to themselves. Those books were like friends she could rely on. They taught her that the world was bigger than her small town, and that her worth wasn't defined by harsh words or unkind eyes. She would read late into the night, her small lamp casting a warm glow over the pages, and imagine a life where she could be free from judgment. Sometimes Lila would walk through the town square in the evenings, past the old fountain and the tiny bakery that smelled of fresh bread. She would watch other families laughing together, parents hugging their children, and siblings teasing each other in ways that felt warm and safe. Her chest would ache with longing, a quiet, steady ache that never left. She wanted that kind of love too, but she felt as though it was a world that had decided she didn't belong to. Even when she tried to talk to her family about her feelings, they dismissed her concerns, saying, "You're overthinking things," or "Stop being so sensitive." Those words stung more than any insult from a stranger because they came from people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. Despite everything, Lila didn't give up entirely. She found strength in the little things: a kind smile from a neighbor, a compliment from a teacher who noticed her intelligence, or the way the wind felt on her face when she ran across the open fields. She learned to treasure those moments, knowing that they were proof that the world wasn't entirely cruel. And though she often cried herself to sleep at night, she never stopped hoping that someone, somewhere, would see her for who she really was. Her teenage years were especially hard. Every birthday, her family seemed to have a new reason to criticize her. When she turned 15, her mother remarked on how plain her face looked in the birthday photo. On her 16th birthday, her father told her that no young man would ever be interested in her if she didn't change the way she dressed. Each word felt like a brick in a wall that separated her from happiness. She began to believe that her family's opinions were the truth, that maybe she was truly ugly in a way that couldn't be fixed. But even in those moments of doubt, Lila never let her creativity die. She would stay up late, sketching the hills outside town, the animals she saw wandering through fields, and the skies that seemed more beautiful than anything else in her life. Her drawings became more than art. They became a way to express her feelings when words failed. Through her painting, she spoke to the world in colors and shapes, telling stories of longing, hope, and quiet strength. It was her way of proving, even if only to herself, that she mattered. High school was a time of social challenges. She watched other girls get invited to parties, dances, and outings, while she remained on the sidelines. She wanted to be friends with them, but often they would ignore her or make subtle jokes at her expense. Sometimes, she would overhear whispers about her plain looks or awkward ways, and it would make her stomach twist. She learned to smile politely, to nod and laugh when appropriate, even though her heart hurt. But she also learned something very important, that kindness mattered more than looks. She would offer help to classmates, share her notes, and comfort anyone who felt left out. Slowly, she realized that those small acts of kindness made her feel proud in a way that approval from others never could. Even though her family never celebrated her, Lila had a few teachers who saw her potential. They encouraged her to enter art competitions, praised her essays, and told her that she had a unique perspective that deserved recognition. Those words became a lifeline for Lila. Every compliment, every small victory became proof that she could rise above the harsh judgments of her family. They reminded her that she wasn't invisible, even if her own family tried to make her feel that way. By the time Lila reached the end of her high school years, she had learned to hide her sadness behind a quiet smile and a determined spirit. She still longed for her family's approval, but she also began to understand that their opinion wasn't the measure of her worth. She had talent, intelligence, and kindness, and those qualities mattered more than any comment about her appearance. She dreamed of a future where she could be herself without fear of judgment, a life where she could be loved for who she truly was. And so, Lila carried on. She worked part-time jobs, saved money, and continued to paint and read. Each day was a step forward, even if it felt small. She knew that one day someone might see the light inside her that had been ignored for so long. Until then, she would keep walking through the fields, sketchbook in hand, finding beauty in the world around her, and slowly learning to find it within herself. After high school, Lila found herself in a quiet routine. She worked at the local diner, a small place with red vinyl seats and a long counter that smelled faintly of coffee and fried food. Most days were predictable. Early mornings, serving regular customers who nodded politely, and evenings spent cleaning dishes and restocking supplies. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept her busy and gave her small moments of independence. Yet beneath the routine, a deep sense of loneliness lingered. Lila had learned to live quietly, to keep her feelings tucked away like a fragile secret, hidden from the world. Her coworkers were friendly enough, but few of them understood the depth of her sadness. She often felt invisible even in a room full of people. She watched as her peers went out on dates, shared laughs with friends, and talked excitedly about weekend plans, while she slipped home alone, carrying a small bag of groceries and the quiet weight of another day that had passed without connection. On her walks home, she would imagine conversations that never happened and friendships that seemed just out of reach. She tried to convince herself that it was normal, that everyone had moments of solitude, but deep down she longed for someone who truly saw her. Lila spent her evenings in her small, tidy apartment above the diner. She had decorated it with her paintings, pinned to the walls in colorful clusters, turning her modest space into a tiny gallery of her imagination. Every brushstroke reflected her feelings. The swirling skies represented her dreams. The flowers depicted hope, and the animals, free and wandering, symbolized the independence she craved. Sometimes she would sit for hours staring at a painting, imagining a world where her family's words no longer mattered, where she could live without judgment. Reading was another escape. Lila loved stories about people who faced hardship and emerged stronger. Characters who were underestimated, ignored, or rejected became her silent friends. She would read late into the night, the soft glow of her lamp illuminating the pages, and for a few hours she could forget the ache of loneliness. The books reminded her that life didn't have to be defined by the cruel opinions of others, that there was beauty in resilience and that hope could exist even in the darkest times. Even with these small comforts, Lila couldn't deny the sting of rejection that seemed to follow her everywhere. She avoided mirrors when possible, not because she disliked her reflection, but because it reminded her of the countless times she had been told she wasn't enough. When she did catch a reflection in a shop window or a puddle after rain, she would pause and search for the flaws that others had pointed out. The shape of her nose, the roundness of her face, the smallness of her frame. It was a habit she despised but couldn't entirely shake. Yet despite the self-doubt, there was a quiet resilience growing inside her. She had survived ridicule for years. She had endured harsh words and indifference. That strength, invisible to most, was becoming a core part of who she was. Lila's interactions with strangers were often brief, but sometimes they offered glimpses of kindness she hadn't experienced at home. The mail carrier always smiled at her, greeting her by name, and occasionally a customer at the diner would compliment her on her art or thank her for her attentive service. These small gestures, seemingly ordinary, had a profound impact on her. They reminded her that not everyone measured people by their appearance, that not everyone judged her before knowing her. Each smile, each kind word became a tiny thread weaving hope into her life. Despite her careful routines, Lila's heart longed for connection. She would watch couples walking hand in hand down Main Street, laughing freely, and feel a mixture of joy and envy. She wanted to experience that kind of intimacy and companionship, someone who would care for her and see beyond appearances. Yet she feared rejection more than anything. Over the years, her self-esteem had been worn down by constant criticism, and the thought of opening her heart to someone new was both thrilling and terrifying. She had learned to protect herself by keeping people at a distance, but deep inside, she knew that love was something she couldn't ignore forever. One day, while serving a busy lunch crowd, Lila noticed a man she hadn't seen before. He was tall, with a sun-tanned face and strong features, wearing a worn leather jacket and boots that had clearly seen many miles. There was something calm yet confident about him, a quiet presence that drew attention without effort. He smiled at her politely when he ordered his coffee and then sat by the window, quietly observing the diner. Lila found herself stealing glances at him during her breaks, curious about who he was. There was no judgment in his eyes, no condescension, just a calm, unassuming interest that made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. Over the next few days, the man returned. He ordered the same coffee, always sat by the window, and occasionally asked Lila small questions about the diner, the town, or her sketches she had pinned to the wall. Each interaction was brief, yet each left a mark on her heart. Unlike the teasing or dismissive remarks she had grown accustomed to, his attention felt genuine. He listened carefully, responded thoughtfully, and treated her as if her thoughts and opinions mattered. For the first time in a long time, Lila felt a spark of excitement, a feeling she thought she had long buried beneath years of rejection. As their interactions continued, Lila began to anticipate his visits. She found herself arranging her schedule so she would be working when he arrived, and she even started creating small sketches to display in the diner, hoping he might notice. It wasn't vanity, it was the thrill of being seen, of being acknowledged in a world that had long ignored her. She discovered a small but growing sense of confidence, the idea that perhaps she could be valued for more than just her appearance, that someone could appreciate her mind, her talents, and her heart. Evenings at home became moments of reflection. Lila would sit by the window watching the sun dip behind the hills and think about the possibility of a new connection. She reminded herself that it was okay to hope, to dream, and even to feel nervous. Her past experiences had taught her caution, but they hadn't extinguished her desire for companionship. Slowly, she realized that her worth wasn't defined by her family's cruel words or by the judgments of strangers. She began to understand that love, true love, was about being seen and accepted for who she really was. Though her confidence was still fragile, Lila's life began to feel slightly brighter. She noticed little details she had once overlooked. The way the wind carried the scent of wildflowers across the fields, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the quiet satisfaction of a completed painting. These small joys reminded her that life could be gentle and kind, even when people were not. They reminded her that happiness didn't always come from approval or attention. Sometimes it was found in the quiet moments, in the beauty of the world around her, and in the belief that she deserved kindness. By the end of that summer, Lila had started to feel a subtle change within herself. She still carried the scars of past rejection, but she was beginning to understand that they didn't define her. She had learned resilience, found small moments of joy, and glimpsed the possibility of connection. Most importantly, she had begun to believe that someone might one day see her not as the plain or awkward girl her family had described, but as a person of depth, kindness, and beauty in her own unique way. Little did she know that someone was closer than she thought, a person whose arrival would change the course of her life and challenge everything she had believed about love, worth, and family. The quiet spark of hope that had been growing inside her was about to be ignited, opening the door to a chapter of her life she had never dared to imagine. Lila had grown used to her quiet routine, but life had a way of surprising her when she least expected it. One late summer afternoon, while she was wiping down the counter at the diner, the door swung open and a new customer stepped in.
He was tall, with broad shoulders and a relaxed confidence that made heads turn without him trying.
His boots were worn from long rides, and his hat-shaded eyes that seemed to look right through the small-town bustle. There was something calm yet magnetic about him. Lila couldn't explain why, but she felt her heart beat a little faster. The man approached the counter, his gaze lingering on her just long enough to make her feel noticed. He ordered a coffee black, and then asked if he could sit by the window. Lila smiled politely and poured his drink, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. There was something different about him. He didn't make her feel small, as so many others had in her life. Instead, his presence felt warm and unassuming, like a quiet river flowing steadily through the chaos around it. Over the next few days, he returned. Lila learned his name was Jack, a cowboy who traveled between ranches for work. He didn't stay long in town, but he seemed to notice everything about the diner, including her sketches pinned to the wall. The first time he commented, he simply said, "These are really good." He didn't mean it as a polite remark. His tone carried sincerity, and it touched Lila in a way she hadn't felt in years. No one in her family had ever shown interest in her passions, and here was a stranger who not only saw her but appreciated her work. Jack started asking questions, small ones at first, about the town, the weather, and her favorite local spots. Lila answered cautiously at first, unsure if she could trust this unexpected attention. But there was a patience in him, a gentle curiosity that made it easy to open up. He never teased her about her appearance, never made her feel awkward, and never judged her past. For the first time, Lila felt seen as a person, not as the plain girl her family had dismissed. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's presence became a comforting rhythm in her life. He would stop by during lunch, sometimes asking for her opinion on a sketch or sharing stories about the ranches he worked at. He spoke about horses, wide-open fields, and sunsets that looked like paintings, and Lila found herself imagining those landscapes through his eyes. She would listen with rapt attention, feeling a spark of excitement that she had long buried. Her heart, once so guarded, began to feel the warmth of possibility. One afternoon, as the diner was unusually quiet, Jack stayed behind after finishing his coffee. Lila wiped down the counter nervously, unsure what to say. Jack leaned slightly on the counter, his eyes fixed on her artwork. "You really have a talent," he said softly. "I've seen a lot of art, but yours, it tells a story."
Lila's cheeks flushed.
No one had ever spoken to her with such kindness and attention. She mumbled a thank you, feeling both shy and exhilarated. It was a small moment, but for Lila it felt like the world had shifted just a little in her favor. As the weeks went on, their conversations grew longer. Jack shared stories of life on the ranch, of early mornings riding horses and evenings under vast, star-filled skies. He spoke of hard work and simple joys, of people who were true to themselves and the importance of respecting others. Lila listened, fascinated, and soon found herself sharing her own stories. The struggles she had faced with her family, the loneliness of growing up feeling invisible, and the quiet dreams she held for her future. For the first time, she spoke freely without fear of judgment. Jack listened patiently, never interrupting, never dismissing her feelings.
One evening, after the diner had closed and the last customer had left, Jack offered to walk Lila home.
The streets were quiet, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Lila felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as they walked side by side, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of normalcy and companionship, a feeling she had thought was impossible for her. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and quiet reflections. She realized that connection could exist even in small, fleeting moments, and it could feel as comforting as the softest blanket on a cold night. Jack noticed the little details about her, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about art, the gentle way she described the world around her, and the quiet determination that had carried her through years of rejection. Lila, in turn, noticed him noticing her, in a way that was both thrilling and reassuring. She had spent so long believing that no one could see past her appearance, that her value was invisible. But Jack's attention was different. It was sincere, patient, and free of expectation. Their friendship began to grow in subtle ways. Jack would occasionally leave small notes for her at the diner. Simple messages like, "Hope your day is as bright as your paintings," or "Can't wait to see what you create next." Lila found herself looking forward to these notes, reading them again and again, feeling a warmth in her chest that had been absent for years. She started to believe that someone could care for her not because she looked a certain way, but because of who she was inside, her mind, her heart, and her spirit. One rainy afternoon, when the diner was nearly empty, Jack shared a memory from his childhood. He spoke of his first horse, a stubborn but loyal companion who taught him patience and trust. Lila listened intently, captivated not just by the story but by the way he told it, with respect, warmth, and a quiet humor. In that moment, she realized that Jack had a rare quality. He noticed things others overlooked. And more importantly, he noticed her, in ways no one else ever had. As the weeks turned into months, the connection between them deepened. Jack's visits became more than routine. They were highlights in Lila's otherwise quiet life. She found herself thinking about him during slow moments at the diner, imagining conversations that had not yet happened and feeling a hope that was new and thrilling. The walls she had built around her heart began to crack, not with fear, but with curiosity and anticipation. One evening, after closing, Jack finally spoke words that lingered long after they were said. Standing outside the diner, under the soft glow of the street lamp, he looked at her and said, "I'm glad I met you, Lila. You're unlike anyone I've ever known. I hope I get to know you even more." Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had spent so many years hiding, protecting herself from rejection, that hearing someone say they wanted to know her truly felt miraculous. She nodded, feeling a mix of excitement, nervousness, and disbelief. Could someone really care for her as she was, without judgment? In the days that followed, Lila found herself more alive than she had felt in years. She smiled more freely, laughed at small jokes, and allowed herself to imagine a life where love and connection were possible. She didn't yet know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that she deserved it. Jack's presence had opened a door that she thought had been permanently closed, showing her that kindness, attention, and genuine care could exist even for someone who had been overlooked for so long. And so, life continued, small moments building into something larger, a quiet story of friendship, understanding, and the slow blossoming of hope. Lila didn't yet know where this path would lead, but for the first time she was walking it with someone who truly saw her, not as the girl her family had dismissed, but as a person of value, talent, and heart. And in that realization, Lila began to understand that life had a way of surprising even those who had been hurt the most. The warmth and quiet comfort that Jack brought into Lila's life had grown over months into something stronger, deeper, and undeniable. Lila had started to believe in the possibility of love and acceptance in a way she had never dared to before. She no longer dreaded the quiet evenings at home or the empty streets of her small town. With Jack, even ordinary moments felt extraordinary. Yet she knew that the real test of her newfound hope would come when her family discovered how close they had become. One Saturday afternoon, Jack accompanied Lila to her family's house. She had hesitated at first, unsure of how her parents and sister would react to him. But Jack had insisted gently, saying, "If they can't see your worth, it's better they see it with me by your side." Lila felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as they walked up the familiar path to the front porch, sunlight streaming through the trees and birds singing softly in the background. She knew this moment could change everything. The door opened before Lila could knock, and her mother's sharp eyes fell immediately on her. The usual critical gaze quickly shifted to Jack, and Lila braced herself for the familiar barrage of judgment. "And who might this be?" her mother asked, her tone suspicious. Jack tipped his hat politely and smiled. "I'm Jack. I've had the pleasure of getting to know your daughter," he said calmly, with a confidence that immediately demanded attention. "And I must say, she's extraordinary." Lila felt a surge of relief and pride. For so long, her family's words had made her feel small, invisible, and unworthy. But here was someone who was not only defending her, but celebrating her. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and her father's eyes narrowed slightly. Clara, her sister, shot a quick glance of disapproval. Lila could feel the tension, but she also felt stronger, steadier, because Jack was by her side. Jack didn't waver. "She is kind, talented, and one of the most remarkable people I've ever met," he continued. "I am proud to know her, and I hope you can see what I see." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that shook the foundation of the family's long-held judgments. Lila's heart swelled. She realized for the first time that someone could look past superficial appearances and truly see her worth. Her mother scoffed softly.
Extraordinary? That's a stretch.
"She's just ordinary," she said, though the words lacked the usual bite. Jack turned toward her, eyes steady and voice calm but firm. "Ordinary, I don't think you understand. Lila has survived more than most people could imagine. She's strong, compassionate, and creative. That makes her anything but ordinary." Lila's father opened his mouth to say something, but Jack continued without hesitation. "She's my friend, and I respect her. I will not allow anyone to diminish her worth. Not now, not ever." There was an undeniable authority in Jack's words, a firmness that left no room for argument. Lila's family could not dismiss him, and more importantly, they could not dismiss the truth he spoke. The air in the room felt charged, heavy with tension, but also with possibility. Lila felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For so long she had been silenced by her family's words, afraid to speak her mind or defend herself. Now, with Jack standing beside her, she felt a courage she had never known. She lifted her chin slightly and looked at her mother. "I am more than what you say," she said softly but clearly. "I am talented, I am kind, and I deserve to be treated with respect." Her mother blinked in surprise, and for the first time in Lila's life, she didn't have a ready criticism. Clara looked away, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Lila's father remained silent, but there was a shift in his posture, a quiet acknowledgement that something fundamental had changed. Lila realized that the presence of someone who truly valued her could change the way others saw her, or at the very least force them to pause. Jack placed a reassuring hand on Lila's shoulder. "She is my woman now," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the room with conviction. Lila's heart skipped a beat. The words were not boastful or aggressive. They were protective, declarative, and full of pride. For the first time, she felt completely seen, fully accepted, and undeniably valued. The years of rejection, the cruel words, and the constant feeling of inadequacy seemed to fall away in that single moment. After a long pause, her mother finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "If you truly care about her, then treat her well," she said, not unkindly, though still hesitant. Clara's eyes softened slightly, and her father simply nodded. It wasn't complete approval, but it was a start. Lila felt a sense of triumph that went far beyond winning an argument. She had finally found someone who believed in her, defended her, and encouraged her to believe in herself. In the days that followed, Lila noticed subtle changes in her family's behavior. They didn't suddenly become warm or affectionate, but they no longer dismissed her in the way they once had. Small gestures, an acknowledgement of her efforts, a brief compliment on a painting, or a quiet conversation became signs that her voice was beginning to matter. Lila understood that change takes time, and that her own sense of self-worth was no longer dependent solely on their approval. With Jack's support, Lila's confidence began to grow in ways she had never imagined. She pursued her art more seriously, spending long hours painting landscapes and portraits, experimenting with colors and styles. She entered local competitions and even received recognition from people outside her family who appreciated her talent. Every accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced the truth that she was more than her family's criticisms. She was capable, creative, and deserving of happiness. Beyond her art, Lila began to take risks in her personal life. She reached out to friends she had lost touch with, joined community events, and even started volunteering at the local library. Each step was a small victory against the fear and self-doubt that had dominated her life for so long. Jack remained by her side, quietly supporting her and encouraging her and celebrating her victories. His belief in her never wavered, and it became a foundation upon which Lila built her newfound strength. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields near her home, Jack turned to her and said, "You don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. You already have it inside you." Lila smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For so long she had sought validation from those who could not give it. Now she understood that true confidence comes from within, and that love and respect from others were meaningful only when they reinforced what she already believed about herself. Their bond deepened further as they spent more time together. Jack shared stories of life on the ranch, of early mornings in the saddle and evenings under vast star-filled skies. Lila shared her dreams, her fears, and the challenges she had faced growing up in a family that had failed to see her worth. Together, they created a space of trust and understanding, a place where both could be themselves without fear of judgment. Lila had never experienced anything like it before, and the sensation of being fully known and accepted was intoxicating. Jack's unwavering support also helped Lila navigate the subtle complexities of her family's lingering disapproval. There were moments of tension, brief arguments, and awkward encounters, but Lila no longer felt powerless. She had learned to assert herself, to stand her ground, and to recognize that her value was inherent, not granted by others. With Jack by her side, she felt capable of facing any challenge, knowing that love, respect, and companionship could exist even in the most difficult circumstances. By the end of the summer, Lila had changed in ways that were visible not just to herself but to everyone around her. She walked with confidence, spoke with clarity, and pursued her passions without hesitation. She no longer feared rejection. Instead, she embraced the possibility of connection and joy. Her relationship with Jack had become a source of strength and inspiration, proving to her that the right person could see her for who she truly was, appreciate her completely, and stand proudly by her side. And so, the summer closed with a sense of triumph and promise. Lila had not only found love, but had discovered her own voice, her own courage, and her own worth. She had faced years of rejection, endured harsh criticism, and survived the invisible wounds of neglect. Yet, through it all, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. Jack's presence had been the catalyst for this transformation, but it was Lila's own resilience, creativity, and determination that allowed her to claim the happiness she had long deserved. For the first time in her life, Lila felt truly free. Free to be herself, free to pursue her dreams, and free to love without fear. And with Jack by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, hope, and the unwavering belief that she was worthy of every joy life had to offer. Life for Lila began to change in ways she had never imagined. The quiet girl who had spent years hiding in the shadows of her family's criticisms now walked with confidence, a gentle smile on her face and a spark in her eyes. The days were still filled with routine, work at the diner, painting in her small apartment, and walks through the nearby fields, but everything felt brighter, richer, and full of possibility. With Jack by her side, she no longer felt invisible. She had someone who saw her for who she truly was, loved her talents, her heart, and her courage, and encouraged her to be the best version of herself. Their relationship had grown steadily over the past months, built on trust, patience, and deep respect. Jack never pressured Lila, never judged her for her insecurities, and always celebrated her small victories. He would surprise her with quiet gestures, a cup of coffee waiting for her at the diner, a new set of paints for her artwork, or a simple note reminding her how talented and strong she was. These gestures were not grand or flashy, but they carried a meaning deeper than any gift could express. He believed in her when the world often did not. Lila's confidence had blossomed alongside their bond. She began to pursue her art more seriously, dedicating long hours to painting landscapes, portraits, and scenes inspired by her imagination. She entered local art competitions and even started selling some of her pieces to neighbors and friends in town. Each sale, each compliment, reinforced her belief in herself. She realized that her worth was not tied to the approval of her family or the judgment of strangers. It existed within her own heart, waiting to be recognized and celebrated. One afternoon, Jack suggested they take a trip together to the countryside where he worked on the ranches. Lila hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to leave the familiarity of her town, but Jack's encouragement was gentle. "You've spent so long hiding," he said. "Let's see the world outside these streets. You deserve it." They rode together through wide-open fields, feeling the wind against their faces and the sun warming their backs. Lila had never felt such freedom. The rolling hills, endless sky, and the rhythmic sound of hooves against the ground felt like a living painting, and she was finally part of it. During those long rides, Lila shared her dreams with Jack, dreams she had once thought impossible. She spoke of wanting to open her own art studio, to teach children how to paint, and to create a space where people could express themselves freely. Jack listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering ideas, but never imposing his own. He believed in her vision, and his faith gave her courage. Lila realized that having someone who truly believed in her made all the difference. She felt that her past hardships had not been in vain. They had prepared her to appreciate and embrace the love and support she had finally found. Returning to town after the trip, Lila noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. Her family still had their old habits, but they could no longer dismiss her as easily. Her mother offered small compliments on her artwork, her father asked her opinions on matters he had previously ignored, and Clara, her sister, began including her in conversations rather than leaving her on the sidelines. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was progress, and Lila felt proud of herself for standing firm, for allowing herself to be seen, and for refusing to let old judgments define her. As autumn approached, Lila and Jack continued to grow closer. They spent evenings watching the sunset from the hills, laughing, sharing stories, and imagining the future together. Lila realized that love was not about appearances, gifts, or grandeur. It was about trust, respect. She felt a deep gratitude for having found someone who cherished her not for what she looked like, but for the kindness, creativity, and resilience she had cultivated over years of struggle. One crisp evening, as they walked along a quiet trail, Jack stopped and looked at Lila. The trees were painted in shades of gold and red, the air smelled faintly of earth and leaves, and the sky stretched endlessly above them. Jack took her hands in his and said, "Lila, I have loved getting to know you. You are incredible, and I want to be with you, not just as a friend, but as someone who shares life with you." Lila felt her heart swell. She had dreamed of this moment, but reality was even more beautiful. She looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity, the love, and the unwavering belief that he had in her. She realized that love was not something to fear. It was something to embrace fully, courageously, and without hesitation. Their relationship became a source of inspiration for Lila. She began sharing her story more openly, talking to friends and neighbors about her journey from rejection to self-discovery. She spoke of the importance of resilience, the power of kindness, and the value of believing in oneself even when others fail to do so. Her story resonated with many, especially young people who had faced similar challenges. Lila found that by embracing her own experiences and learning from them, she could help others find hope and courage. Meanwhile, her bond with Jack deepened in everyday moments. They cooked meals together, painted side by side, and spent quiet nights reading and talking. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just steady, unwavering companionship that made Lila feel safe, valued, and loved. She realized that the strongest love was not the one shouted from rooftops, but the one quietly lived in moments of understanding, patience, and mutual respect. One winter evening, as snow lightly fell outside, Lila received a call from her mother. There was a softness in her voice that had rarely been there before.
"I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you," her mother said. "I don't always say the right things, but I see now that you are strong, talented, and capable.
And I am glad Jack is in your life." Lila felt tears well up, but they were tears of relief and joy. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and after years of rejection, it meant everything. Lila and Jack continued to build their life together, small step by small step. They celebrated successes, comforted each other in disappointments, and encouraged each other's dreams. Lila's art flourished, and she began teaching painting classes at a local community center. Children and adults alike were drawn to her patience, creativity, and gentle encouragement. She realized that her experiences, the struggles, the rejection, and the years of quiet perseverance had given her the ability to connect deeply with others. Her art became not only a personal passion but a gift to her community.
Spring arrived, bringing new life and energy. Lila and Jack planted flowers in the garden behind her apartment, rode through fields bursting with color, and planned for the future together.
Lila felt a sense of completeness she had never known. She had found love, but more importantly, she had found herself. She no longer defined her worth by others' opinions, no longer feared rejection, and no longer doubted her place in the world. With Jack's love and support, she had discovered that happiness and fulfillment were not things to wait for. They were things to create, nurture, and embrace. By the end of that year, Lila understood a profound truth. Real beauty is never skin deep. It lies in courage, kindness, resilience, and the ability to see and accept oneself fully. She had survived rejection, learned to trust, and opened her heart to love. And in Jack, she had found someone who reflected her worth back to her every day. Their story was not one of instant fairy tale perfection, but of patient, steady growth, of facing challenges together, and of learning that love is strongest when it is rooted in respect, understanding, and unwavering support. And so, Lila's life continued. Not as the quiet, overlooked girl she had once been, but as a confident, joyful, and fulfilled woman. She embraced every day with hope, creativity, and courage. With Jack by her side, she had found not just love, but a partnership built on trust and admiration. She had learned that rejection and judgment were temporary obstacles, but love, self-respect, and personal growth were lasting treasures. Lila had finally stepped into the life she deserved. A life of freedom, joy, and unconditional love.